If you're looking for the perfect gateway into the gritty and brutal world of Warhammer Fantasy, Trollslayer is it. The story kicks off with Felix Jaeger, a disgraced poet who's lost everything after killing a man in a duel, and getting expelled from college. Aimless and angry, he joins the infamous window tax riots, where the Reiksguard Knights are about to cut him down in the chaos. But then it happens. A hulking, axe-wielding dwarf named Gotrek charges in, dismembers the knights, and saves Felix's life. What follows is the start of an unlikely partnership, forged in blood and bound by an oath that will lead them across the darkest corners of the old world, and we do mean the darkest. But before we dive into the adventures that define this novel, let's talk about what it really means to be a Trollslayer, and why Gotrek's quest for a mighty doom makes the book unforgettable. A Trollslayer is a disgraced dwarf. Those have either been shamed by dishonor, heartbreak, or yes, humiliation. They often abandon traditional society in pursuit of their death with honor. These outcasts take up the dangerous path of hunting monstrous foes, hoping for a glorious end to redeem their past failures. While most perish swiftly, the rare few who survive become part of an eccentric brotherhood known as Trollslayers. Living only to die in battle, they seek out the most formidable enemies, with trolls being the ultimate prey due to their near certainty of death that they promise. Trollslayers are unmistakable. They're marked by their wild spiked orange hair or nails in your head, elaborate tattoos, and flashy jewelry. They revel in recounting their exploits, displaying their scars as badges of pride and embracing a life that could teeter on excess, often including overindulging in eating, drinking, and deliberate self-deprivation. Now back to the story. At this point in the story, we're not fully aware of what Gotrek did to earn this fate as a Slayer, though it's clear that whatever it was weighs heavily on him. The mystery surrounding Gotrek adds an intriguing layer to his character and compels us to keep reading, hoping to uncover more about his past. After Gotrek saves Felix from the Reiksguard Knights, the two find themselves in a tavern where they drink to excess. In this drunken haze, Felix takes a blood oath to become Gotrek's sworn rememberer, tasked with chronicling the Slayer's quest for a mighty doom in an epic poem. At the time, Felix scarcely understands the gravity of this oath he's taken, nor the monumental task ahead of him. What follows is the beginning of a journey that would change them both in very profound ways. Felix quickly discovers that he has bitten off far more than he can chew. Gotrek, for all his determination to meet a glorious end in battle, just doesn't seem to know how to die. What Felix imagined as a straightforward tale of heroism turns into a saga of increasingly dangerous and bizarre adventures, with Gotrek defying death at every turn. Trollslayer is a fantastic introduction to the Warhammer Fantasy universe, particularly for newcomers to the old world. Each chapter is a self-contained story told like an episodic adventure, so for those that don't know, a TV episode. This structure makes the book accessible and easy to follow while still providing a compelling narrative thread that ties the episodes together. As a person that's read both the novels and has done the Audible, I recommend Audible. Jonathan Keeble is a fantastic narrator. He really crushes it. For those of you that don't know, he did Flight of the Eisenstein, Black Legion, Talons of Horus, and he really does an outstanding job narrating everything, so I recommend Audible. The stories are brought to life by the dynamic between the two protagonists. On one hand, we have Gotrek, a member of the Elder Race, the Dwarves. An Elder Race member is someone that was created by the Old Ones, so High Elves, Dwarves, and I believe Lizardmen. The Dwarves' values and perspective are utterly alien to Felix, who's a human. This contrast highlights the cultural and emotional divide between them while offering a rich opportunity for character development. One of the book's greatest strengths is how Gotrek and Felix grow, and I wouldn't necessarily say they grow towards one another, but alongside one another. Felix starts out as an ordinary man, not particularly brave or strong, and certainly not of warrior stock. But over the course of the book, he learns to face his fears, endure loss, and understand the unyielding nature of dwarven honor. His growth is not about becoming a warrior like Gotrek, but about finding his own kind of courage and strength. Gotrek, for his part, begins the story with a chip on his shoulder, dragging around a man he initially sees as weak and unworthy of the path he's chosen. But as they journey together, Gotrek comes to respect Felix, not as a friend, for the Slayer really does keep himself emotionally distant from him, but almost as a comrade. The relationship they develop is one of shared purpose rather than affection, and it reflects the harsh, practical bonds often formed in the grim world of Warhammer, the Old World. For those new to Warhammer, Trollslayer is an excellent introduction to the Old World. It reveals the setting, piece by piece, starting with the relatively familiar towns and roads of the Empire and gradually introducing its more fantastical elements. Through Gotrek and Felix travels, the reader encounters small towns, the borderland outposts, and the wild, untamed regions in between. Along the way, we meet beastmen, orcs, goblins, and chaos worshippers, each presenting unique threats. One of the book's most surprising revelations is the insidious nature of chaos. Before I read Trollslayer, I had thought of chaos as like a distant northern threat, something that really kind of just messed with Keith with the exception of like Archaon and Festus the Leech Lord. However, it was always in my head something far removed from the Empire's heartlands. But through the stories, we see how chaos just infiltrates every level of society, sometimes often hiding in plain sight among even the most devout followers of Sigmar. This unsettling reality adds a layer of tension and intrigue to the series. I absolutely love it. Now, again, we'll touch on it. What makes Trollslayer freaking fantastic is the standalone adventures, the character dynamics, themes of duty and honor, and accessible world building. Now that I've kind of covered that, go listen to the book and come back to the video, or you can keep going because now it's time for me to spoil everything. I'm going to cover my top 3 chapters in this book and talk about why I think they were impactful. I have rough outlines kind of drafted out for this. However, I'm going to be doing a little bit off the cuff because I want it to be more like a book club style feel. Please let me know down below what you think about it. If you're like, hey Tyron, I don't like that, go more of a script, I'll do that. But let's begin. Geheimnisnacht. Now, the first chapter of Trollslayer really wastes no time throwing Gotrek and Felix into danger and mystery. It's setting the tone for their tumultuous journey. Shortly after leaving Altdorf, where they destroyed the Reiksguard Knights, got drunk and swore an oath, the pair is unceremoniously kicked off a coach. I say unceremoniously because Gotrek's less than polite remarks about the driver and his wife force them to travel on foot. On this walk of theirs, you start seeing Felix kind of take a little of his frustration out on Gotrek, and Gotrek will give it right back. They really have zero tolerance for one another. And Felix is very hesitant to trust the Trollslayer. He's always reaching for and putting his hand on the hilt of his sword. And Gotrek just has zero patience for the man. He thinks he's weak, pathetic, always getting sick. And we start getting a real decent idea of how the ancestor races look upon the humans. Felix is complaining about getting a cold, and Gotrek's like, your race is weak. How can you afford to be so frail all the time? And while this is kind of going on, Gotrek's calling out to the woods, issuing challenges to nothing, and this freaking black coach out of nowhere tramples up behind him, almost runs over Gotrek, and Gotrek is pissed. He is not happy, to say the least. So they go and they storm off after this coach to try and catch it. Now this is where their path leads them to the Standing Stones Inn, where they force their way past a barred door, a barred big wood door, while Gotrek slams his axe into it, and uncover a chilling tale. On Geheimnisnacht night, it's steeped in dark magic, and covens operate from the ominous Darkstone Ring. And this Darkstone Ring has been stealing children and villagers for sacrifices. The innkeeper's son and wife are among the missing, and Gotrek and Felix vow to find the ring, destroy the coven, and rescue the captives. And now this is kind of fulfilling in Felix's head, and you'll see this as a common theme throughout this novel. Felix really wants to be the hero. He really, in his head, wants to be like the Detlef Sierck plays, where he's just this giant hero, over-dramatized. But what Felix is in for is the rude awakening of the real world. He's going to go through perils and triumphs. No one's going to care. They're often going to be steeped in sadness or have a twist where it's just a big blow to Felix's ego. And yet you'll see him become callous, but also resolute as he goes through. And so they're on the way to the ring, and it takes them through, not the ring like the movie. The journey to the ring takes them through eerie terrain where they encounter a rotting cultist kind of muttering incomprehensible chants and just being a weirdo. And it reaches out and grabs Felix, and Felix is taken aback. He hesitates, he stutters, and Gotrek does it. He piles that axe into it, slays the dude, and this is Felix's first lesson. Do not hesitate. For Felix, he's used to duels in a very controlled environment, a very polite way of fighting somebody, and this is combat now. So he's going to have to ditch some of the life lessons he learned while at college and start taking on more of a hardier way of more of a warrior-like approach to battle. So when they finally get to the Darkstone Ring, they find the coven mid-ritual. There's some purple smoke going up above the head dude's head. They're about to sacrifice a stolen baby, and then they're listening kind of from like the bushes, and out of just shock, Felix is like, no, and he yells out, and the freaking cult leader looks. He's like, what the hell? He sees that guy, and he's like, get him, he's bad. And finally Gotrek kind of snaps into it too, and they just start, well, Gotrek just starts pummeling cultists like it's cool. Just smacking his axe into him, punching him with his big ham-sized fist. And Felix isn't doing too bad. He runs a couple people through, gets taken down. He starts to feel himself die as he gets strangled by a cultist. And then here's Gotrek just battle roar. Pulls it together, stabs the cultist, gets him off him, throws a dagger, hits the cult leader in the gut, and right as that happens, Gotrek finds his axe and just starts burying it again in more cultists. At the end, it said that it looked like a demon had been possessed and run through the entire cult ceremony. Axes, body parts, limbs, heads, everything was scattered everywhere. But the silver lining is the baby was saved. However, this is where the little twist comes. The couple that Felix was sent to come find, Gunther, which was the innkeeper's son and his wife, they weren't victims. They were cultists themselves. And both at this point are now dead from the battle. However, with the baby being saved, they leave the cursed place behind. I like this story because it's pivotal for Felix as it marks his first direct encounter with the insidious power of chaos. Throughout this series, he frequently reflects on this night. The horror, the revelations, and the brutal truths about the old world that begin to kind of reshape him into the man he would become. Very, very pivotal, and they do. Most of the books will come back to this moment. Now, I hate to be cliche, but next in the lineup is Wolf Riders. The story kicks off kind of with Felix, and this sometime after Geheimnisnacht. He's in a tavern, kind of playing this role of a hero, sticking up for this maid, this young maiden named Kristen, who's just kind of getting harassed by these trappers, Hef, Kel, and Lars. So Felix is like, hey, don't mess with that girl. Well, they just came out of the field, you know. They've been out there for a few months being weirdos. And they've been trying to get some ladies, you know. And they go up and they're like, you know, maybe I'll take on this guy. You take the ladies. And Felix eventually hits the guy. The guys jump him, beat him up. And then right when they're about to run the dagger through him, Gotrek comes in because Kirsten went and got him. And right there, they just pissed themselves. I mean, Gotrek's a pretty nasty sight. He's got that red hair. Everyone kind of knows if you're out in the wilderness what a slayer is. And it cowls them into submission. They run away. But not after Gotrek stomps on one of their hands, just crushing it. So anyways, they get to talking. And, you know, Felix is over there looking at Kirsten. He's like, hey, yo, you're not too bad looking. You're kind of good looking, little lady. You know, maybe I'll come with you and help you carry some of this stuff down to your caravan. And that's kind of where they get the skinny, that she's part of the Von Deal migration, and that they are traveling to the borderlands because he's been usurped. He's been kind of brought down. Little do we know, we'll find out that this family has a curse upon it. Gotrek and Felix already head in the same direction towards Carrick 8 Peaks on the promise of treasure from one of the bar owners. They decide to join the caravan, finding safety and convenience in the numbers that they bring. On this journey, they go through a couple perils. He finds out some backstories that they've been beset just by tragedy and grief the whole time. And as they're crossing the Grey Mountains and entering the borderlands, Felix starts really finding himself falling in love with Kirsten, and Kirsten him. And it's really starting to kick off, and Felix is really starting to think, like, how much do I need to uphold my oath to the Slayer? Because I am in love, I'm starting a new area, I can build my life alongside these people, and I helped them get here. And you really start seeing him trying to fight to hold on to his oath to Gotrek. This romance would only offer a brief respite from the grimness of their journey, because they would soon be making camp at the Cursed Hills, and during their night they would be attacked by undead warriors. Chaos erupts in the melee. Felix is out there making sure Kirsten's okay. He finds a soldier walking by and it turns, and he realizes it's not a soldier, it is an undead skeleton warrior, and he runs it through. Now, in the kind of chaos, Lars, one of the trappers for the group, bumps into Felix, and it said he was so crazed he started swinging at Felix, and Felix had no choice but to run him through. But then Felix, thinking back on it, was really wondering how much of Lars was really scared and how much of him saw it as an opportunity to get payback from the bar and kill him. Though they managed to drive off the undead, the shadow of death still looms really heavy over the group. It's a very heavy blow they took. Now, seeking safety, the Von Deals and their party, they take shelter in this ruined fort. Now, Gotrek, he wants to bounce. He's out of here. He's like, come on, man. There's money, there's gold. I'm poor. You're poor. I'm going to take most of it, but I'll give you a little bit for showing up. And Felix is like, hey, Gotrek, you were an engineer before you became a slayer. And Gotrek's a little embarrassed. He's kind of like kicking his foot in the ground. And Felix is like, come on, can you help rebuild this fort? We can't leave these people here. They're going to get overrun by the goblins. And Gotrek is like, okay, let's do this. So before long, they're building up the fort. They're fortifying it. And right as they're done, Gotrek's on post, and Felix is working up to him how he's going to tell the Slayer that he's going to break his oath. And he goes up to Gotrek on the ramparts, and he's like, oh, how do you think your work's going to do? And Gotrek's like, we're going to find out soon enough because they're here. So they get attacked by this goblin wolf riders, and leading him is a cunning goblin shaman. And in the first attack, Godfred, the Von Deel's leader, is struck by an arrow and taken away by his son Dieter, so the baron that's been usurped. And then his kind of bastard son Dieter, who's not really related to the family, he's like a half-brother, ends up carrying him away to nurse his wounds. There's also another character named Manfred Von Deel. Now, Manfred Von Deel, it's important I kind of go into him a little bit. He's kind of a playwright. Felix knows who Manfred Von Deel is. He's like, you wrote this one play, and Von Deel's like, did you like it? And Felix kind of recounts kind of it being heretical and not even allowed in the Empire in some places. But he tells him, it was okay, very dark and sinister. And, you know, he's kind of a weirdo. This guy's kind of standoffish. He's a little, like, stuck up, too, on top of it. So there's always this little, like, disconnect between Manfred and the rest of the group. But anyways, this sorceress, Frau Winter, starts just blasting the goblin shaman. They get in, like, a mind-lock battle. She's fighting it off. Kirsten's kind of her helper, so she's kind of doing the best she can to keep Frau Winter in the fight. And at the end of it, the Goblin Wolf Riders retreat, and they remain victorious, but at a massive cost to the people in the hold. Now the next day, we get the second assault from these Wolf Riders. They're getting hit from the ramparts. Frau Winter needs to go back to check on her powers to make sure she's doing okay and harness them. And after a while, no word comes back from the group. So Felix tells Gotrek, and Gotrek's like, hey, go check and make sure they're doing good. What Felix is about to discover will be his first massive blow to his heart and a huge nightmare to him that he'll live with for the next couple books. He goes up the steps and he stumbles upon the body of Frau Winter and Kirsten. Frau Winter's dead and Kirsten's dying. Felix picks her up, heartbroken, and Kirsten says, you know, no matter whatever happened, this was the best journey I could have ever had with you because I met you. And she dies. I mean, way to freaking lift a guy up, am I right? So Felix, freaking heartbroken, is like, I'm going to get whoever did this to you. And he's not really sure what happened at this point. He's trying to figure out, how did the goblins get up here? How did they figure this out? So he heads deeper in the fort. And this is where he finds Dieter, the captain of the party. His skull is just utterly smashed in. He goes in, he sees the old Baron Gottfried stabbed to death, and sitting nearby is Manfred Von Deel, calmly wiping blood from his blade. In a chilling revelation, Manfred explains the curse of the Von Deel legacy. It's a mutation caused by a heretic's curse on his grandfather. Driven mad by his family's dark fate, Manfred's claim he broke the curse by killing the remaining Von Deels. Felix is pissed, horrified, and utterly baffled, and he decides to duel Manfred. Manfred's not a bad fighter, but you know what? Eventually, it's freaking Felix. He comes through. He's mad. He comes through and just kills him cold. And in the middle, kind of ramming his sword in his gut, he's like, the curse is broken. And there it is. Right there, the entire Von Deels are wiped out. Felix, at this point, heartbroken and just kind of beset by grief, decides to go out and meet his end. He's like, I'm either going to go down there and I'm going to see Gotrek, or I'm going to go out there and I'm going to die by his side fighting goblins. And he kind of walks out, and there's all these bodies everywhere. The rest of the trappers, Hef and Kell, are dead. The goblin shaman's dead. Countless others are dead. And the Trollslayer is just backed up, beaten, battered, and bruised. And this is where we find the first characteristic that would become of Gotrek Gurnisson. He has lost his eye in this process. But he single-handedly managed to hold the gate. Whatever was remaining went on to other places to take up refuge. And the pair is off on their next adventure, leaving behind another chapter of blood and tragedy and heroism. The story ends, but the journey still continues for Felix and Gotrek. Felix, I would say at this point, is just more scarred, but he's still resolute. He's understanding, like, this is his new life now, that fate almost is going to tie him to Gotrek. Now, before we go into the last chapter, I want to do some notable mentions. Here are some standout chapters that deserve, to me, the honorable mention from Trollslayer. They're not only deep in the lore and characters, but also deliver memorable moments that stick with the reader long after the pages have been turned. And for me, and you might disagree with this, The Dark Beneath the World is great. It's not something I put in here because he really only gets Caragul out of it. But anyways, they go and they're wandering through the woods to go to Caragate Peaks. They run into this group, and one's a Knights Templar of an Order of Sigmar. He's traveling with a Bretonnian who's a tracker and some other parties and they're fighting orcs. Anyways, Gotrek and Felix go help them take out the orcs, bury the dead, and they're on their way to Caragate Peaks. When they get there, they find out that there's been a tomb, it's been opened, the whole place is haunted and crawling with goblins, and there's a big nasty troll waiting at the end of this freaking adventure for them. Now when they get there, it's revealed why the Templar is crusading on this quest. He's trying to retrieve a lost artifact of his order called Caragul, which is an enchanted sword, and it's been lost for like 80 years. So they get there, they go through this, kill some goblins, run away a little bit, and finally they find the grave, and inside this mass tomb is Caragul and a bunch of treasure. The Templar, which you think at this entire time is just an utter badass, he's just, you know, very locked in, put together. He runs up, thrusts his sword in the air, he's like, I got it! And then this big chaos troll comes up behind him and just rips his head off and throws the carcass away. They go, they fight, everyone dies. Felix throws some isopropyl alcohol on him. Gotrek hits him with a fire, and then the thing dies because it ruined his regen save. Pretty freaking dope. The rest of the goblins are going to come and attack him and kill the group off. And then we get a Lord of the Rings, Return of the King scene. The ghosts come and they take out the goblins. It's cool. You get the sword. We get a little bit moving forward here on one of Felix's artifacts that he'll carry. And it's honestly a nice little story, in my opinion. And then last notable mention for me is the Mutant Master. Now, I like this one. I thought it was funny, quirky, and kind of hilarious. So Felix is finally getting a shot at being a hero in this chapter. And again, it's just not Felix's day. He's just not going to have it. So they get to this village in Blutdorf. And it's a really downtrodden and bleak place. The townsfolk are cowled. They live in fear of an evil sorcerer who resides in a nearby tower. The sorcerer has kidnapped their children, leaving the villagers too terrified to rebel. As usual, Felix and Gotrek decide to act, but not before finishing their last beer. You know, Felix has this thing where he's like, let's just get another beer. He tries to delay the inevitable as long as he can. And he knows that beer is something that will dissuade Gotrek from going out right away. That decision, though, to stay for one last beer would unfortunately lead them to being drugged by the villagers and delivered straight to the sorcerer. Here, Felix comes face to face with someone he probably never thought he'd see again. The evil sorcerer's name is Kruger, and he is a disgraced former college peer who fled academia after stealing a forbidden book. Now, Kruger is now a warpstone-addicted maniac. He's been conducting horrific experiments and creating monstrous mutants in his twisted pursuit of power. Now, breaking free, Gotrek immediately does what Gotrek does best. He slays Kruger's monstrous servant in a bloody fight, and in retaliation, Kruger's kind of like stumbling up the steps. He's noted to be kind of clumsy, unleashing his other mutants on the pair in an attempt to escape. Gotrek and Felix cut their way through these horrors, taking out every mutant in their path. It's really easy for them too. They can make some note to say, these things just can't fight. Kruger goes to kind of unleash this magical spell. It hits Gotrek but travels through the chains, and eventually it's like an electric bolt. It just kind of like the power dissipates at the end. And then Felix obviously throws a throwing knife and catches Kruger right in the gut. And Kruger is like out of there. He flees. Eventually, Felix catches up to him, demanding that he release the children. And this is where the gut punch comes in. Kruger reveals, with a twisted sense of triumph, that the mutants Felix and Gotrek slaughtered were the very children they had set out to rescue. Chaos had left them vulnerable to Kruger's dark experiments, warping their bodies into grotesque forms. Devastated by the revelation and consumed with rage, Felix would throw Kruger from the tower window, ending the sorcerer's reign of terror, but leaving behind a harrowing sense of futility and guilt. It is noted, too, that Gotrek patted him on the back with some pride after he hucked him out of the window. Why did I pick these? The relentless corruption of Chaos, I think, is a big one. Chaos is not just an enemy, it's a persuasive force that really corrupts everything it touches, from magic to nature to humanity itself. And both these chapters really emphasize how no one is truly safe from its reach. Another reason would be kind of like Felix's moral struggles. Felix is not just a chronicler, but he's a man grappling with the harsh realities of the old world. In the Mutant Master, he confronts the horrors of unintended consequences, a theme that recurs throughout this entire series, mark my words. Gotrek's relentless drive is just freaking utterly amazing. These stories really showcase just Gotrek at his best, unstoppable, brutal, and always ready to face the next battle, no matter the odds. Yet he can't even shield Felix from the emotional and moral toll on their adventures. Gotrek is really kind of hoping, and I think Gotrek wants Felix to kind of see the brutality of the world, to harden him a little bit. He wants Felix to kind of stop being a prissy little manling and kind of have a little bit of a dwarf mentality. Take on, I am hardy, I am good. fight, die. This is how it's meant to be. These chapters really perfectly capture the essence of Trollslayers, grim, dark, unrelenting, but deeply human at its core. They're great examples of why this book, and the series as a whole, resonates so strongly with me, and I think I'm speaking for most of the fantasy fans. Now from there, we're going to go to the last chapter, The Mark of Slaanesh. Now listen, I personally don't like the chapter a whole lot. I mean, it's funny, it has some quirks. If it wasn't about the character growth in here, I would have put the Mutant Master here for sure. The Mark of Slaanesh picks up with Gotrek and Felix having left Carrick 8 Peaks. Their journey take him to a small downtrodden village, you notice a trend here, at the edge of the ominous Drake-walled forest. This village is under the cruel grip of a gang of vicious thugs who, as it turns out, are secret cultists of Slaanesh. Dude, what is up with the Slaaneshi trend in this, man? I mean, I really thought they were going to get down on some Tzeentch or Khorne. And they get down somewhat on Khorne, but I don't know. I always picture like Khorne and Tzeentch just being the main gods of chaos, but I guess Slaanesh would make sense in the fact that like the Empire being the way it is. It's probably easier to hide like your overindulgence. But yeah, so anyways, trouble starts almost immediately when Felix starts trying to lay low at a local tavern. Felix gets his butt brutally beaten by these cultists, aka gangers, and the situation goes from bad to worse when Gotrek, during a skirmish with mutants on the road, takes a slingshot stone to the head and suffers amnesia. Gotrek cannot remember who he is, who Felix is, or even his quest to find a heroic death. And in the lore of a Trollslayer, if you die without knowing why you were supposed to die, apparently you have no absolution. So it's very big. And you'll see this come up in another book, I think Zombie Slayer, or Shaman Slayer. You'll see it come up where it's a massive boon to be able to remember why you're dying. Now, desperate and alone, Felix seeks help for Gotrek, and he's kind of directed like this local healer named Cryptman, not Phidias Cryptman from 40k everybody, regular Cryptman. The healer promises to concoct a brew to restore Gotrek's memory, but only if Felix gathers a list of rare ingredients, and he has to go up this massive mountain through where all the mutants were and all the beastmen, and brave that by himself. Now, Felix on this journey narrowly avoids the cultists, who are now looking for him to kind of mess with him and kind of teach him a lesson. When he evades them, he runs into the mutants. The mutants think he's playing a trick. They're looking for Gotrek to come out of the woods. They think it's a trap, and they end up leaving him alone. They just wanted to tell him that they had learned from their lesson last time, and they weren't falling for it. So Felix is just thanking Sigmar that everything worked out well. He picks up these flowers that are needed and goes back to Cryptman. However, the potion is brewed and administered, and it has zero effect on Gotrek. This is where you see Felix just lose his cool. Frustrated and exhausted, Felix accuses Cryptman of being a liar and a charlatan, attacking him in a fit of rage. During the scuffle, Gotrek is accidentally struck on the head again, and miraculously his memory returns. With his mind clear and his rage at full strength, Gotrek wastes no time setting things straight. The duo storm back to the tavern where Gotrek and Felix exact brutal revenge on the Slaaneshi cultists, cutting down the thugs in a whirlwind of blood and fury. Now the chapter showcases the resilience and determination of Felix. He could have chose to left and forsake his oath, but he's kind of leaning into it now. Dwarven culture is really rubbing off on him. He knows it's wrong. He feels like it's wrong to leave him. So he chose to stay and fight to protect Gotrek even when the Slayer's at his weakest. It also highlights the bond between the two, a partnership forged in battle, if you will, where even memory loss and overwhelming odds can't keep them down. Gotrek's triumphant return of his brain pairs the brutal retribution against the cultists, which makes for such a satisfying and action-packed resolution of this grim and gritty tale. The whole chapter you're reading this, you just hate these dudes. They're just D-bags, and you're just waiting for him to get it. You know Gotrek's gonna get his brain back because there's a whole nother book, right? But you're just like, I can't wait to hear about how he gets them. And finally he pummels them to pieces, and you're just fulfilled at the end of it. I would say never have characters been so hated in the fantasy setting by me than these idiots. And there you have it, a little glimpse into the dark, thrilling, and unforgettable adventures of Trollslayer. From battling chaos cults and mutant horrors to unraveling cursed legacies and forging a bond that transcends duty, this book delivers everything you can want from a journey into the old world. But what truly makes Trollslayer stand out isn't just the brutal battles of the grim setting, it's the characters. Gotrek's unyielding quest for a glorious doom, a mighty doom if you will, and Felix's reluctant courage and their evolving partnership create a story that's both action-packed and deeply human. Now, I'd like to kind of hear from you. What was your favorite part of Trollslayer? Is it Gotrek's fierce determination or Felix's growth? Or is it neither and just listening to Gotrek pummel things? In the dangerous Warhammer Fantasy setting, It's a lot of things that I really love. I personally am a big fan of the Chaos Warriors, and Gotrek and Felix really opened up a new way to look at the factions that I otherwise didn't really like. And I have a newfound respect, I think, after going through this series. I mean, not like a newfound respect, but I kind of appreciate the Empire more, because before I read this, they just looked like a bunch of dandies, you know, with their poofy arms and their feathers in their hat, but they're actually pretty cool. An army I could see myself maybe one day getting into, but it is not this day. Now, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and peace.